Good morning. My name is Jim Mayola, and it is my pleasure to be interviewing Mr. Mark Ripper. Mark, we're in the Express studio here, and it's Tuesday, August 10th, 2010. Good morning, Mark.
Good morning, Jim. How you doing?
I am doing great. Now, as we start, let's tell me a little bit about yourself. You lived in the county for a number of years. I think you were telling me that you grew up in Owings Mills, was it?
Yeah, grew up in Owings Mills, went to high school at Pikesville Senior High. Moved to the county with my parents while I was in college. I attended Loyola College, that's where I got my bachelor's in accounting, and then ended up getting my master's at Mount St. Mary's in Emmitsburg.
Oh, okay.
So I worked for Random House here in the county for a little over 5 years.
With a lot of other folks.
Yeah, and then moved over. I actually changed careers. I was originally a certified public accountant and worked at Random House as a cost accountant, and then moved over to Carroll County government and went into the computer field. And now I serve as the Chief Information Officer for Carroll County government, and I've been with them for 22 years.
Wow,
so
time flies.
Yeah, it goes by quick.
You've seen a lot of changes in the county, I imagine, in those years.
Oh, a number of changes. Yeah. So I think I can remember going down 140 between here and the Beltway. There were like 3 lights once you got out of Westminster.
Not like that anymore.
Not anymore.
No, wow. So you're here to talk to us today about St. John's, I understand. Okay, what can you tell us about St. John's?
Well, I serve as a deacon at St. John's Church. I was ordained by Archbishop William Keeler in 2001 and originally served down at St. Joseph's in Sykesville, but my family and I had always been parishioners here at St. John's in Westminster, and a little over 2 years ago he reassigned me here to St. John's. I have 2 children who go to the school there. My son Mary, who's starting 1st grade in a couple weeks, and David, who'll be in the 4th grade.
That's great.
And in 2003 was the 150th anniversary of St. John's, and I had always been interested in that. Was asked by the pastor, Monsignor Art, to actually write a parish history, and I did that in that year, and we actually published a book with the history of St. John's.
Fantastic. Now, St. John's goes way back.
Good.
The church people see today is, of course, not the church that's always been there.
No, and actually there's 2 churches on the campus right now. The newest church, which was dedicated in 2003, and then the what we now call the portico, which we have as a reception hall, was the original church on that campus. They were actually the 4th and 5th church for St. John's. The original property was about 4 acres, was given to some. At that time, it was not St. John's. It was actually still called the Winchester Catholic Community. In fact, Westminster wasn't even called Westminster when this all started. It was called Winchester.
And approximately what year was this?
It was in 1777. Actually, the family by the name of John Logsdon actually gave the people 4 acres of land, which is the area located over where the Westminster branch of the public library is.
Correct.
And you can still see the cemetery is still over there. St. John still owns that property, and there are some parishioners even today who are have plots there and are buried there.
Very interesting. So we're going back to the 1700s when we hadn't even settled on the name of our town.
Now, in fact, when the whole thing started, it's funny, 1777. When that started, everything started in 1776, so we were long a country before, declared our independence before it started here. The first parish in Carroll County was actually St. Joseph's in Taneytown, was formed back in 1789, and we were actually a mission of our community. The Winchester Catholic community was actually a mission of that parish for a long time.
In Taneytown.
In Taneytown.
Okay.
So, and then in the late 1700s and early 1800s, they actually built a small church on that property. We don't have any pictures of it or any really good descriptions of it, which was the first church that was built. Later, that was demolished, and a second church was placed on that property. And again, we don't have any really good information about what that looked like. But the third church that was built there actually lasted for almost 100 years. On that property there until we moved out to the campus that we're now on today, and the 30 acres were given.
Okay, talk a little bit about that church. That was, when people go back, the old timers talk about St. John's. They remember St. John's on Main Street.
On Main Street, and it was. It's interesting that we have something in the Catholic churches called the Stations of the Cross, which are the 14 steps that Jesus took during his passion, death and resurrection.
Correct.
And those stations were actually made over in Germany, and they were made out of really interesting material. Most of it is horsehair, and then there was a paste that was added to it, and they actually came in through New York on a ship, and they were placed in that church. And there was a period of time, that church lasted, like I said, for about 100 years or so. A lot of people are familiar with the fact that there are railroad tracks near that church. And that church took a pretty good beating. It had the steeple struck by lightning at one point and actually knocked down from it. And a lot of people think that that's why the church was condemned, and actually it's not. Back in that time, when they put roofs on the buildings, the roof of the church was slate. And what would happen is over time, because of that train going by, there was a point where the slate roof was buckling in like this, and it was actually pushing the walls out.
No kidding.
From it. And they had a study done on the cost of redoing it, and the engineers told us that the cracks went pretty far down the structure, so it would have pretty much had to have been a rebuild, and that's why they decided to just go ahead and have that church demolished. And we were given 33 acres on the current property where we are now, out in Westminster.
Now, so what was happening then is there was a lot of train traffic during that time. I mean, passenger trains, they had freight trains, all kinds of things going through, and they vibrated. And I guess the church was so close to the tracks.
The slate roof and the weight of the roof was blowing the walls out. So, and what's interesting, that the train tracks even have a little bit of history with St. John's. The dedication of that church actually took place 4 days after the death of President Abraham Lincoln, and his train. They used to do that back in that time. They would have a train that would go through. That train actually came by the property there.
No kidding.
At that point.
With the body.
With the body in it, yeah.
I'll be darned, because I understand when Lincoln was assassinated, they took his body all over the country by train. Yeah, so people could see it. Very amazing. Now, I understand that the windows from that church were also saved and preserved.
Right. Yeah. It's about 10 of the stained glass windows were preserved from that church, and in the new church that we have now, that was built in 2003, we have those 10 stained glass windows. We have the Stations of the Cross. We actually had those redone. They had been over time. It's interesting how the stuff survived, because both of them had actually been kept in somebody's barn for a period of time. When the old church was finally condemned and they sold off a lot of the stuff that was in there, nobody was interested in taking the windows or the stations. A lot of the stuff in the church was given to parishioners for donations, those types of things. Some of the things they decided they were going to use in the new church that they're going to build, but some of the things they decided they weren't going to use. And the stained glass windows and the Stations of the Cross were two big items. And there was a family with the last name of Crone who actually took the Stations of the Cross and actually kept them out in a barn on their property. And surprisingly, from the time that was done through 2003, almost a 30-year period, they were pretty well preserved for the conditions they had been kept in. Amazing. Now, we did have to send them up to a restoration company in Philadelphia that actually repainted them and did them all that and got them back to their original structure, but they now hang in the church. But interestingly enough, the other thing that we have in the new church, we actually have a lot of things in the new church from that third church on Main Street. The altar is originally from that church and served in the fourth church that was on the St. John's campus. What we call the ambo, or the place where the readings are done from. The two angels that are around the tabernacle are from there, statue of Mary and statue of Joseph. But the other thing is the pipes from the organ on that original church are there. Now, we've had to replace the console that the person uses to play that organ, but the pipes are there. And we actually had to build in special in the church, because some of the pipes are only this big, but another one of the pipes is almost 15 feet tall in there, so in order to fit it in. And so it's been it's a really nice mix between the new and old now at the current church that we have there.
So it was kind of a leapfrog, because when you had the church at the portico, a lot of that stuff was still in storage.
A lot of that stuff was still in storage. We used the altar and the angels and a couple of the things, but a lot of the stuff was in the storage. And the church that was the fourth church on the campus was built in the early 1970s. So, and the churches at that time throughout the country and, Archdiocese of Baltimore were built more in the round type thing. And so we had purple carpet. That was always an interesting issue. And the Stations of the Cross that were used at that church had that orange that people used to use in their kitchens in back of the station. So you could tell it was a church of that era when it was built.
So when they designed the new church, the church today, it's more in the form of a cross.
Yes.
And much larger.
Much larger. The old church could seat about 800 people. This church can seat 1,200 people now. And we have the ability in the transepts of the church and in the back of the church, we have when it was constructed, we can actually add balconies into the church that would allow us to seat up to another 800 people, 400 in the back and 200 on the sides if we needed to do that at some point in the future. So.
And you brought back the stained glass.
We brought back the stained glass. We have 10 of those windows in there in the front, and the Stations of the Cross came back into it.
That must have been quite an undertaking to bring back those the stained glass. They had to be restored, didn't they?
They had to be restored, and of course they weren't in one piece.
Right.
They had to, so they all had to be reassembled. And we're not sure. Originally there were 12 windows in the old church, and we're not sure what happened to the other two. Whether they were destroyed accidentally when they were taking them out, or whether they got lost somewhere along the way.
Well, to look at the church, you wouldn't even know that they weren't planned for that church, that they weren't brand new. But what a wonderful piece of history to bring, into the church to carry the tradition.
And the committee was able to do that. I mean, we knew that we wanted to do that when we designed this church. So all of that stuff was taken into account by the architects as the church was designed and laid out.
Amazing. And the church is very vital now, very vibrant in the community. You've got, how many masses do you have now?
Well, we have one on Saturday evening, and we have 5 on Sunday, and last December, one of them is now in Spanish Mass.
I understand that.
So it's 12:15. So, and starting last September, I started relearning Spanish. I had it in high school, so that I'm able to assist at that Mass with the Hispanic community. And we've grown tremendously. I was looking back through the notes and all. At our 100th anniversary in 1953, they talked about having about 1,500 people in the parish. Today we have over 4,500 families in the parish.
Yes.
So, and the couple of things have gone. We also were unique in that we had a school most of the time that the parish has been in existence. Originally we covered all 12 grades and started off basically with a 2-room schoolhouse and a couple of teachers. Over time, the first thing to come out onto the new campus was the school moved from the Main Street area out into what's now Monroe Street there, and actually built a high school. And that high school still stands. Now it serves grades 1 through 8. Eventually it started in the 1950s, and the last class graduated in May of 1970 from there. And that was due to the number of enrollment caused us to have to decide to close the high school. But the elementary school's been continuing all along, and is still thriving today with about 400, a little over 400 students in it. In fact, this year they're actually starting a pre-K program there at St. John's. So they have 2 classes of each grade. And we just, St. John's is going through a lot of personnel changes over the last year or so, and we have another one coming up. We had a new principal that started last year, Miss Harrian Walker, and she's done a lot of great new things with the school coming in. The previous pastor, Miss Pat Brink, was just absolutely wonderful with the kids, and she was there for quite some time and really helped build that school up. While she was there, we went from 1 of each class, each grade, to 2 of each class.
Fantastic.
So, and in the time I've been there, I've only known 2 pastors. So we had Monsignor Anicheski served there for 21 years before he died. He was serving at St. John's when he passed away. And then Monsignor Art Valanzano was sent to us, and he's been with us now for 17 years. And he recently received the honor of being made the rector of the Basilica in Baltimore, which is the oldest Catholic church in the country.
Wow.
So he'll be leaving us the end of this month. We'll be having a massive Thanksgiving, and he'll be going down there starting on September 1st of this year.
What a wonderful honor.
So, and we have about 60 groups now that are active in the parish that have started at different points in time. The Knights of Columbus, which I'm sure people are familiar with, recently celebrated their 100th anniversary
Mm-hmm.
here in the county and at St. John's in 2009, April 2009. And there's another level of that called the fourth degree, which actually started in 1952. And they're celebrating their 50th, have celebrated their 50th anniversary, and have been an active part of the St. John's Parish community.
And St. John's does a lot of other things in the community. They have a lot of events and activities. I know they have a carnival each spring.
Right. The carnival, we started that several years ago. They'll be having a flea market coming up soon. They started having some dances, and of course, what we call the portico at St. John's was the church that I was buried in. Has been renovated, has a full kitchen in there. We have a variety of caterers who will come in and help cater events. Holds about 400 people standing, a little over 200 people sitting, and gets used for a lot of county events. Even the Carroll County Department of Economic Development has used it for several years now for their economic conference each year.
Sure, yeah, it's a wonderful use of the old church, which is fantastic because it's a moneymaker for the church itself. It helps to bring some revenue in, but it helps you to stay very tied and connected to the community.
Right, and the parish uses it a lot as well for its various events, so it's nice to have that facility there.
Conferences in there and training in there and all kinds of things, but they also have dances and other social events.
Right.
Which is really wonderful.
So, and we have a little bookstore there. A lot of people don't know that, but on one side there's a little bookstore in there, and it's been open as long as the portico itself has been open. And it's one of the few religious bookstores and the only Catholic bookstore really close to this area.
And the public's invited to
Public's invited to come in. They're open on Sunday afternoons and or Sunday mornings and Tuesday and Thursday afternoons.
Okay, that's good to know. You put a book together about the history of St. John's. That must have been a tremendous undertaking.
It was a tremendous undertaking, but it was a lot of fun. What happened was Monsignor Art had asked me to assist with the writing of the history of St. John's, and we also had a video that was done at the same time. Another person by the name of Bill took care of creating a video, but it was a really interesting project. We actually formed a committee of about a dozen people or so who got together and started laying out what we were going to actually include in the history of St. John's, and to help us to gather the facts and the details and the pictures and the artifacts over the year. We actually did this type of thing with quite a few of the parishioners, and we actually have an archive of our own where we interviewed families who had been in the parish for a long time and were able to tell us their history with the parish and how they worked. And as we put all this stuff together, I wrote the book. I had a lot of people help with the editing and the making sure that we had all the facts straight. We had a book that was written for the 100th anniversary, which kind of helped us out a little bit, gave us a little bit of history to start with. And we had a little bit of an update done at the 125th anniversary, but we took all of that information and compiled it again from the beginning to the end. And when you think about the fact that our history started about a year after the signing of the Declaration of Independence, we had a lot to do with the Civil War in this area. We have the Shriver, the Union Mills homestead. The Shrivers actually had their own private chapel. A lot of them are buried in the St. John Cemetery here in Westminster. In fact, Herbert T. Shriver has one of the largest stones there, which is a full-size cross there at the cemetery. So we're an active part of our community.
That's fantastic. I guess it's a little awkward to have the grave sites located downtown off of Main Street, and the parish or the church is actually about a mile away, I guess, now.
Sure. Out on Monroe Street, and it was a difficult decision for the people of that time to make that decision not to rebuild the church there on that. But it would have just been a tremendous amount of cost. It was, of course, a confined area that they had to build the size structure that they needed for the growth of the parish. And initially, they didn't know what they were going to do with the property. At one point, the city of Westminster was in consideration for buying the property, but it ended up going to the public library system, and that's where their headquarters are now. And their parking lot goes right up to the cemetery.
It does indeed, yeah.
And we had an Eagle Scout about a year or so ago who actually went through and did another really interesting history project and got the entire cemetery mapped out.
No kidding.
With all the gravestones and where the people are and who that type of thing. So, very interesting.
Fantastic. I bet the Genealogical Society would be very interested in that.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah, but the move to Monroe Street was really a good move for St. John's.
Sure.
You had
And
to
there was a transition period in there. Western Maryland College was very gracious for a while. We actually used Big Baker Chapel for some of our services up there for a year or so, but it was taking a little bit longer to decide what we were going to do and getting the new church structured. So what they actually did for several years was that every Saturday, they would go and set up chairs in the gym, have mass in the school gym, and then on Sunday take it all back down again so they could have the school on Monday.
Right, no kidding.
Went through and did that.
Yeah.
So, and they put a time capsule into that fourth church that was dedicated in the early 1970s in there, and we actually opened that up on the 150th anniversary, and we have another time capsule now in the current church that will probably be opened at some point in the future. I don't know exactly when, but
fascinating. What did you find in the time capsule from the fourth church?
There were a lot of papers from that time period, some information about the church itself, and some things in there. Wasn't a very large one, so but just some general information about that time when it was put in the 1970s. And again, for a lot of the parishioners, when Monsignor Joe Aniszewski served for 21 years and Monsignor Art served for 17, that's almost 40 years of the church history. So a lot of the parishioners up there either know only Monsignor Art or Monsignor Art and Monsignor Joe as their pastor. So what we're going to be going through in September is going to be a real change for us.
It will indeed. So what about the future of St. John's? You're going through a transition right now.
We're going through a transition right now. The parish is very vibrant. We don't know who our new pastor is going to be yet. What happens is the Archdiocese of Baltimore has come out and they've talked with the staff. They had a meeting with the parish council, and then they had a meeting with any parishioners who wanted to come up, kind of find out where we are, what we were doing, what we would like to see in a new pastor. And then they go back and look at the priests that are currently serving in the Archdiocese of Baltimore. We know that they're going to want the person to have 2 successful pastorships at other parishes in the Archdiocese, so obviously be an experienced pastor. We're not the largest parish in the diocese, but we're in the top 5 or 6 in the diocese with 4,500 families. It's for a pastor, besides the spirituality part, it's almost like running a small business.
Oh, I imagine.
And then having also a school with 400 students in it. You have the principal who oversees the school, but still having that responsibility. It's going to be a large undertaking for somebody to come in. And both of the pastors, were very much loved. Monsignor Joe, it was a real shock when he passed away, and it was a shock for us. Nobody was expecting Monsignor Art to be leaving. We thought he'd be there until he retired. So, but the bishop has decided to give him this assignment down in Baltimore at the Basilica, which is a really great honor for him.
Oh, it is, and a great honor for St. John's.
Yeah. So,
absolutely.
And that's the other thing with our last 2 pastors. In the Catholic Church, when a priest is ordained, we call them father, but there's an honorary title that can be given to them if the bishop that they serve under thinks that the service that they've given has been outstanding over the years. And St. John's has been blessed in both cases. Father Joe was made a Monsignor, and Father Art was made a Monsignor while they were here. We've had 3 of them over the history. We had 17 pastors so far. So, and 3 of them have been elevated to Monsignor while they've been at St. John's in Westminster.
That's fantastic. Yeah. Well, anything else you can tell us, Mark? Anything about St. John's that you want to share?
Well, just that, the one thing I really haven't talked a whole lot about is our religious education program. We have a huge religious education program, obviously with 4,500 families. 400 students in the Catholic school. We actually have a lot of students throughout in the public schools. And come to St. John's for the religious education and sacramental practice. Last year alone, we have something called First Holy Communion, where the children receive the body and blood of Christ for the first time. We had over 200 kids in the religious education program receive that. We had over 100 kids who became adults in the church receive the sacrament of confirmation in the church last year. So it's a very vibrant community. Like I said, there's over 60 groups up there. We have for everybody. There's groups for the children at various ages in life. We have a life teen group for teenagers, which helps them make that transition from being a child into adulthood, and deals with all of the things that you need to deal with for kids who are growing up in that age. We have something called the Edge for middle school children, and then we have the religious education program for the younger children. Every Sunday we have a children's liturgy of the word at the 10:30 Mass. where we take all the kids who haven't, generally around the first communion age or younger, go over across to the portico, and they have their own liturgy of the word. They read the scriptures that are a little bit easier for children to understand and explain it in a way that children will understand it. About a year, I think it's been about a year and a half, 2 years ago, we started with the Hispanic Ministry. Originally, we had a priest come up from Sacred Heart in Glendon and was doing the masses at 3 o'clock. That community has continued to grow in St. John's, and in December of last year, early December of last year, the bishop came out and actually celebrated our first Spanish Mass at the 12:15, which was a regular English Mass before that, and we've got a large enough community now that we felt needed to incorporate them a little bit better into the parish and the culture of the parish. And Padre Hector, who is from Colombia, has a very interesting background. He was actually the chef for the President of Colombia at one point before he decided to go into the priesthood, and we've been blessed to have him sent to us. And the Hispanic community is continuing to grow. We generally have between 200 and 300 people at the Spanish Mass, and oddly enough, it's pretty much split between the Anglo community and Hispanic community. So it's doing exactly what we had intended, bringing the two communities together at St. John's.
Yeah.
It's an absolutely wonderful, vibrant parish. A lot of our parishioners hold positions in various organizations around the county as vice presidents or presidents of various companies, and it's just a wonderful place to be. I'm just absolutely thrilled to be assigned there, hoping to stay there until my children graduate from the school from the 8th grade.
Sure.
So because I serve at the pleasure of the Archbishop, so wherever he would see a need for me to go, I can be moved. But
this makes sense.
But this makes sense right now, and
it
works out well.
Yeah, it's very interesting that St. John's has seen the need in the community and has grown with the community.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Well, and that's an important thing. It's not just the parishioners of St. John's. We just don't take care of the people at St. John's. When you talked about the community, we have a St. Vincent de Paul Society that is there every day of every weekday. There's somebody in the office down there for several hours during the day. They have a great working relationship with the other social service agencies in the county.
Sure.
Department of Social Services knows what services we can provide and what they do, and they can actually recommend people to come over to see us. And we can provide people with food vouchers or money for bills, medical bills, electrical bills, those types of things. We've helped people out with rent. And all of that money that society has to help the people comes every week from the parishioners. That's the money that they put into the poor boxes in the churches. And it's doing very, very well. We have great relationships with various other companies in the county that help providing services or discounts on things for the people, and it really is so we have that outreach. We have people who serve at some of the other nonprofit organizations that are helping out in the community as well. There's something called the Westminster Ministerium, which is a group of the leaders of the various churches in Carroll County, and together as a group they work together. In fact, we've invited several of them to Monsignor Art's last Mass because of the close working relationship we've had over the years at St. John's.
Now, do you have a soup kitchen or anything like that?
We don't at St. John's, but we help out with the soup kitchen. Not sure exactly which church it's at, but we have parishioners who go over and help out with that on a regular basis.
Close working relationship. Yes.
So, every year at the on Good Friday, several of our churches get together, and we actually do the Stations of the Cross through the city of Westminster, and we'll start at one parish. This year we started at St. John's and ended up at another church. Next year we'll start at that church and go to another church, and rotates around amongst the community. So there's a relationship there as well between the various faith communities in Westminster.
Excellent. You mentioned earlier that when you designed the new church that you had the ability to put in balconies. Is there any plans to do that?
Not at this point in time. With the number of seats that we have, seats about 1,200, and the number of masses, we're able to do a comfortable number of masses on the weekend at this point. There's no real need to pursue that right now. So obviously the earlier in the morning, the fewer number of people they are. The 10:30 being the Children's Liturgy of the Word is generally the most well attended. We also have a 6 o'clock Mass on Sunday evening, which started out with the Life Teen group that I was talking about. It was designed specifically for the teens, where the homily was directed towards them, and over time, and it started I don't know, at least a dozen, 15 years ago. I mean, it's been around for quite some time, and it's really grown into a strong mass for the parishioners to come to. It's a well-attended mass in the evenings as well. Still directed towards the life team. They sit together as a group at the mass, and homilies are directed towards the teenagers with things that they'd be facing in their lives. But the parish community comes in for that mass as well. And then the life team group afterwards goes over and has a meeting of their own after that mass at 6 o'clock on Sunday. The music's a little more upbeat. We have actually have a world-renowned musician who has actually composed a lot of his own things, George Masuya, who plays at that mass. So we've been very fortunate. He's played all over the world. A lot of his songs have been played by other Christian music players. So very fortunate.
Let's talk about the music a little bit. You have a variety of music.
We have a variety of music. We have everything from no music at 7:15 in the morning to we have a traditional choir and cantors there. And, of course, we have that wonderful organ that a lot of the newer churches, couldn't even begin to afford something like that today that we were able to bring from the old church. So we have a very talented organist, Regina McCurdy, who is also the choir director at this point. And at the 8:45, we have a little more of a contemporary group with guitars and that. 10:30 is the choir mass, and 12 o'clock generally we have a cantor with organ. We also have an electric piano that they can use as well. And then at the 6 o'clock is where we have the drums and all, and a little more upbeat music. And then the 4:30 mass on Saturday evening is traditional music as well. And at 12:15 we have a Hispanic choir that has been developing very well over the last several months coming together. And it's great to have that music. And Father Art's last mass, it's primarily going to be in English. It's going to be bilingual. Some of the readings will be done in Spanish. Some of the prayers will be done in Spanish, and then some of the music is a mix of English and Spanish music as well.
That's fascinating. It's really fantastic that we're so lucky, so fortunate to have such a vibrant Catholic community here in St. John's.
Right. In fact, one of the recent events we had this past spring to bring the various communities together even more is we actually had a cultural event in the parish center, actually made the front page of the Carroll County Times, because the Hispanic community comes from a variety of Spanish countries. They had each of those set up, but then we also had some countries set up from Africa. There was some people there that showed us their culture. The Americans, of course. We had hot dogs and beans at one of the stations, but it was a really great thing because you got to sample the foods and learn about the various cultures and how they come together and learn a little bit about the people, and it really helped saw the dance. Padre Hector even got out and danced at that, and it was just a lot of fun. So.
That is fantastic. It's great to know about St. John's and about the vibrancy and how it's growing and what a wonderful part of the community it is. Mark, before we leave, I wanted to ask you something about the book that you published. Now, I'm sure there's copies of that in the public libraries. Are there ways that people can access that besides that? I mean, do you have copies at your bookstore?
Well, actually, we probably have a couple copies at the bookstore, but the one thing St. John's also has is we have our own library at St. John's.
Oh, okay.
And we have copies of the book in there, and then we have a lot of other stuff in the library, mainly of a religious nature, but just not books, but we also have audio tapes. We have videotapes for children and adults on various parts of the Catholic faith, on the saints, church history in general, the various aspects of the Catholic faith. It's I don't know what the exact hours are off the top of my head, but if people called over to the parish, they'd be able to tell them. It's open in the evenings. I know Wednesday evening is one time, I think between like 7 and 9 o'clock or so, that it's open, but it's probably open other times as well that people can go over, and anybody can sign out books. And
okay, so if anybody, like a school child, was doing a report and wanted some information about a particular saint, let's say, they could go there.
They could go there and research that.
And check materials out.
And check materials out. The librarian that we have, Connie Cinquino, was actually a librarian, so she's got the history, and it's all set up with the same system that the library uses as far as the numbering, and all well organized. Cool. She knows where all the material is, and would be able to assist people however they need it.
Well, that's fascinating. That's another great resource that's offered by St. John's.
So, and we've had a couple of videos done. We had one for Monsignor Joe. When he passed away, we had a video that was done talking about the history up to that point. And then, of course, the video that we did for the 150th anniversary, they're both in there as well, so people could go and see those videos and actually see the parishioners themselves talking a little bit about their experiences at St. John's. And it shows the 150th anniversary video focuses a little bit differently than the book does. We were much more of a historical, focusing on the dates, all the various pastors and associate pastors, all activities. The video was able to incorporate a lot of the construction of the new church into it and what was going on. So there's a lot of that included in there as well, because that construction was going on as we were writing the book. So it worked out well, and they could go a little bit longer in the video than we could in the book. We had a much tighter deadline that we had to meet before the actual dedication that took place in October 2003.
Now, you mentioned that you had videotaped some of the parishioners. They were talking about their experiences in the church and their experiences in the community. And did that get incorporated in the video as well?
Yes, some of that got incorporated in, but we also kept all of the original tapes. So I think we took about 100 hours of video of talking to parishioners and various other aspects, and it got melted down into about a 30, 40-minute video summarizing everything. But we still have all those other tapes kept as well.
When was that video done, the main video?
It was done in 2003 as part of the 150th anniversary.
Yeah, fantastic. Now, I think you mentioned that there had been a previous video done as well?
There was a previous video. It was called Father Joe's Way. In fact, the street that connects Monroe Street over to near where the car wash is called Father Joe's Way. We actually named it after him. And again, it was just a short history because he'd been there for 21 years before he passed away. So again, it's a short video, has parishioners in there talking about them, and we actually incorporated some of that video into the newer video.
And when was that one done?
That was probably done in, I'm going to say in the early 1990s. There. I don't remember the exact year. Well, Monsignor Art's been there 2000, 1993, yeah, so probably in the 91, 92 time frame that was done.
So still contemporary?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Very interesting. Anything, since you've done all the history, did you have any videos or anything from further back?
We don't have any videos. Oddly enough, what we did get was a lot of still pictures, and some of those got incorporated into the video. And then in the back of the book, we actually have about just 100 pictures, and we identified what they were, and pictures of that dating well back into the 1800s. You know, and of course we have a lot of the gravestones from the cemetery back into the time frame. So a lot of the names that you see around St. John's today, you can see over there at the cemetery. I mean, that's how rooted a lot of the people are in this community. They've been here all those generations.
And you've got gravestones back to the 1700s.
Back into the 1700s. So.
But no photos of the first two churches.
No photos of the first two churches. And even what we have of it's interesting, even what we have of the church that was on Main Street, there was postcards that were actually done of the church on Main Street. There were at least 2 of those that we were able to find out about. And there were some inside pictures taken at like Easter or Christmas, a couple of the holidays that gave us some indication. Oddly enough, we have most of the photos we have is when the church was struck by lightning, and the photos that they needed for insurance purposes to show that the damage was done. And we've incorporated some of those into the book. So it really gave us a little bit of an idea of the structure of the church that was there.
Any floor plans or anything like that? Were you able to dig those up?
I was not. I don't know that we, really looked at all that. But somebody may have some. I don't know if they actually have them for that church, but obviously for the fourth church and the fifth church, they have all that stuff. And that's the other thing that's helped us with doing this history is we're continuing to keep stuff. If there are articles in the Carroll County Times every now and then, we're cutting those out and including them so that somebody decides to do this at the 175th or 200th anniversary, they'll have a little bit easier time gathering the information than what we did. And of course now with video being so readily available, we have parishioners that are really good at doing that and take video at a lot of events and take pictures at a lot of events. So this next 50 years of history is going to be a lot more well documented than we were for the first 150 years.
Well, it's been a labor of love, I'm sure, but it was well worth doing.
Oh, it was well worth it. And again, overall, it was probably close to 100 people that were involved either by providing us information or artifacts. We took everything that somebody gave us, we took pictures of it, and then unless they made a donation to the parish, then we were able to give them their artifacts and their photographs back. And of course today with the digital photography, we were able to scan the images in and return them to the families so that they would be able to continue to have them in their families throughout the years. And
It's a wonderful way
yeah,
to
so it was a
share.
lot of work,
Mhm.
a lot of people
Oh,
to
absolutely.
accomplish, and it was a lot of fun writing a book. So
I'm sure.
still hard to believe that I actually wrote a book, but
Well, you've been published, and it's a great thing, a great work.
thank you.
Any final thoughts?
No, just if you ever have the chance to stop by, the church is open during the days,
Mhm.
to go in and see some of that history that's there. People are more than welcome to do that. You know, if anybody wants to learn more about it, they can contact myself through the Parish Center at St. John's, and be happy to take people on tours of it and go in a little bit more detail as they're looking at the various things about how they came about.
And you have a daily mass, don't you?
We have it. We actually during the school year we have 2 daily masses. We have one at 7 in the morning and one at 8:30.
Okay.
In the summer we just have one at 8 o'clock.
Mhm.
And then when the school's in session, the children have a mass each Friday that they go to, and I think that's at 9:15 is
Okay.
when that is.
And then a Saturday afternoon mass.
At 4:30.
And then Sunday.
Sunday
masses?
is 7:15, which is quiet mass. 8:45 for the contemporary. 10:30 for the choir. 12 o'clock is generally a cantor. 12:15 now is the Hispanic, and then the 6 o'clock is the life team.
Okay, so you've got a mass for everybody.
For everybody.
Yeah, so you just pick the what you'd like to go, and everybody's welcome.
And everybody's welcome.
Yes. Okay. Well, Mark, it's been just a joy to talk to you today.
Oh, it's been great to be able to come in and do it.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
I want to thank you and have a wonderful day.
Thank you. You too, Jim.